Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lulu Asad. I'm a crime prevention criminal justice officer at UNODC. It's a pleasure for me to moderate today's event, which is actually very timely as it coincides today with the International Youth Day 2022. And our event today is entitled Intergenerational Learning, Educating Young People on Judicial Integrity and Countering Corruption in the Judiciary, which is organized by UNODC's Global Judicial Integrity Network, which is represented today by Ms. Tatiana Veres, and also the Global Resource for Anti-Corruption Education and Youth Empowerment, GRACE, which I also coordinate. Today's event represents a very interesting occasion for us to celebrate the International Youth Day 2022 in a manner to create long-lasting knowledge, interest, curiosity, and mutual learning among our panel, which brings together international experts in the judiciary sector, judicial integrity, anti-corruption education, and of course, most importantly, the voice of young people who are the leaders of tomorrow. Please allow me to welcome Honorary Victor Reyes, currently serving as judge in residence for the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges in the United States. Previously, Judge Reyes was a judge in Colorado, the United States, and presided over criminal, civil, probate, and family court matters. Prior to the appointment, Judge Reyes served also as a deputy state public defender. We have also with us today Professor Dennis Neves Abade, Professor of Criminal Law at Mackenzie University of Sao Paulo and Federal Prosecutor at the Brazilian Federal Prosecutor Service. We have also today members from the UNODC Youth-Led Integrity Advisory Board and also members of the Global Judicial Integrity Network and the Anti-Corruption Academic Network, as well as students of the Universidad Presbiteriana Mackenzie. Many thanks for accepting the invitation to join us and discuss the importance of judicial integrity and countering corruption within the judicial sector. This session aims to create a dynamic forum to exchange views and share ideas on the relevance, new challenges, and also the future of integrity, and in particular judicial integrity for the rule of law. I also want to touch again on the International Youth Day, and this year's theme is actually about intergenerational solidarity, creating a world for all ages. Therefore, the overarching objective of all our discussions today is to focus on that and to also discuss the need to bring people of all ages and walks of life together to learn from each other and also to exchange ideas, knowledge, and to most importantly also look at this gap that is of course existing between the generations and how we could bring those generations together to advance the fight against corruption and to promote ethics and integrity and advance the Sustainable Development Agenda with a particular focus on SDG 16. As all of you know, corruption is a complex social, political, and economic phenomenon that affects all countries and hinders the rule of law. It undermines democratic institutions, erodes economies, and contributes to political instability. While there is no internationally agreed upon definition of corruption, there are many actions which are recognized as forms of corruption. They include, for example, the abuse of power, bribery, embezzlement of public funds, maliciously interfering with the justice system, or hiding even the financial gains of corruption. Addressing corruption in society is linked to the promotion of individual and social integrity. Many everyday situations challenge our integrity and ethical judgment, from skipping a line to using our positions to give someone an undue advantage over others. Today's thematic focus is that of strengthening judicial integrity and preventing corruption in the justice sector. We will therefore talk about judicial integrity from the judicial perspective. We will also talk about learning about judicial integrity from an academic perspective, and we will all engage in a constructive dialogue surrounding the need for a judicial sector that is free from corruption in order to promote fair, just, and peaceful societies. And of course, we cannot have this discussion without also bringing the perspectives of the young people and what can also young people do to become themselves the torchbearers of judicial integrity. At UNODC, we are strongly committed to these efforts, and we support member states in this important area of work, and we look forward to this important and timely discussion. I encourage all of the audience to listen carefully to the panel's contributions and write down interesting points that you hear. If you have any questions that you would like to ask the panel, as we will have a Q&A session afterwards, you can also write it in the chat option there. Togetherness is key for sustainable progress. Together, we will build peaceful and stronger societies that are free from crime and corruption. I hope that you will enjoy today's discussions and learn something new and actively engage in today's dialogue and be inspired also to take action. Thank you so much. And before I give the floor to our first panelist, I would encourage everyone to turn on their cameras so we could have, please, one group picture. Thank you.
Okay, everyone, just give me 1 or 2 minutes to take a few screenshots. And please keep your cameras on. Then one more. Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex. And I must say, I'm very excited. I think it's really interesting to bring our Judicial Integrity Network also together with our youth and academic networks to see, to discuss this important topic and to actually celebrate this important occasion. So without further ado, I have the pleasure to invite Honorary Victor Reyes to speak. Mr. Reyes, you have the floor, Judge Reyes. Thank you.
Can you hear me well enough, I hope?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you so much for that incredible introduction, because I think you cover many of the points that that are integral in our working in a system where other human beings are depending on our wisdom, our compassion, in order to make decisions over their lives. As was mentioned before, my name is Victor Reyes, and I'm currently the judge in residence. I retired 7 years ago from the bench in Colorado, and in December I took on the role of judge in residence for the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges, which is located in Reno, Nevada, but I actually live in Pueblo, Colorado, in southern part of Colorado. I want to really thank the UNODC for this opportunity to speak on a topic that I've been speaking about with judges throughout the United States. And it's the issue of the intersection between judicial integrity and personal wellness. So when I look at, as I was thinking about what to talk about, and I think it's also so important that the young people are here with this conversation, because I know that we have just as much to learn from you and your experiences and your life experiences and your thoughts than you would ever have to learn from me. I can't speak for anybody else. And what I'm going to be sharing with you, these thoughts, they're just my thoughts. And these are thoughts that have arisen as I've dealt with many of the ethical issues that judges and other, any human being deals with in their lives. But we kind of place ourselves in a different situation when we assume the role of a judge, of a judicial officer. So when I look at judicial integrity and I try to define it, I don't think there's a difference in my mind between my personal integrity and judicial integrity. Integrity is integrity. It doesn't flow and change just because you put robes on. It heightens in the sense that now you're under more of a microscope than ever before, because everybody in your community is watching what you're doing, analyzing what you're doing, making inferences based upon what you do, not only about who you are as a human being, but what you're going to do as a judge And a lot of things that one of the things that I've found over the course of time is that people will impute what their personal integrity is on you, expecting for you to do certain things that they would be doing. So when I look at this idea of integrity, I think about just having a value system of knowing, and I think intrinsically we all know what is right. And I think we need to also recognize that as human beings, we're going to have, experiences, and we're going to make decisions that at times don't comport with our value system. And I think that we always have to analyze, why not? As I said, we get that gut feeling when we know we're pushing the edges. We get that gut feeling when you give somebody at the counter money and they give you too much change back, and you've got an extra euro or dollar, and the feeling of what to do, but the decision at that moment is the action that you take and how that connects with your value system. So when I look at analyzing our value systems, I think we look at this idea of being fair, of being just, of being honest. And honesty is huge for us as human beings, because sometimes we don't like to look at ourselves in the mirror, and we don't like to analyze the things that we do. We don't want to have that ability to really reflect. Some of us just proceed with actions. And as I look through the lens of a judicial officer, we're also talking about rule of law, procedural fairness, that when people come before you, they know they're going to be heard. They know they'll have the opportunity to present whatever they are seeking to present. They're going to present it in a forum where everybody's on the same level playing field. That just because you have money or just because you know somebody, that's not going to temper the decision of that judicial officer before you. So you're talking about rule of law, you're talking about procedural fairness, you're talking about a concept that we've been doing a lot of speaking about in the United States, is cultural humility. Recognizing that you don't know everything. Recognizing that human being that is relying on your decision making has their own personal experiences, has their, for lack of a better word, their background, their culture that they're appearing before you, and having that openness to always learn, to openness to recognize that I don't know everything about this person, their background, their decision making. So we look at this idea of treating people also with equanimity, with a balance, that every human being that appears before us appears, and it deserves dignity, deserves to be treated in a manner that as a human being, it's just intrinsic and how we should treat people. So when I think about this, and I think also, and in each one of these subjects, actually, we could spend hours talking about, and I know there's multiple papers written, but also I think of, as a judge, when we look at this idea of judicial integrity, is that we have compassion. And defining compassion not as empathy, but being empathetic, being understanding of others, being having the ability either cognitively or actually experientially understanding where other people are coming from, and taking an action based upon wisdom to helping those people resolve their issues. Being humble. And then some people in some community societies don't equate, the judge who walks in with a black robe and everybody stands up, that this person is humble. But humility is key because it keeps us grounded. And it keeps us, I think, away from the issues that we're talking about today, which is, corruption. And when I look at the definition of corruption, it's interesting because I think of corrupting your heart. When I think about corruption, I think about corrupting our value system, corrupting, that essential part of a human being, which is your heart. And I think the other thing that we need to recognize also as judges is to be altruistic in our treatment of everybody before us. So when I'm looking at this issue of how to mitigate against coming up with a mindset that would even go to this area of corruption in any way whatsoever, not accessing my integrity, I look at starting with what is my motivation? What is my motivation for taking any action? And being honest about what our motivation is. And when I take an action, when I have a thought, even as a judge, and when I was doing something, I would really analyze the why I'm doing it. And if within any of that why creeps in selfishness, then I think we're into the point of corruption. Seeing corruption, somebody exchange a money bag with somebody, that's the easy thing. But it was mentioned earlier, the cutting in line, the doing things that are not right, those are forms of corruption that we start layering that when we take that first step, when we do something that we know goes against our value system. And then sometimes it becomes easier to take that second step and the third step until all of a sudden you're just mired in unethical behavior. And and this idea of motivation, it should never be just in the back of our minds, it should be in the forefront of our mind, in our forefront of why we're doing what we're doing, which then also for me begs the question, why did you become a judge? Is it, did I become a judge because, I wanted recognition in my community? Did I become a judge because I was in a point of my career? I was like, what else am I going to do? Well, I'm going to become a judge. Some of us are guilty of this. I'm also talking about things, a process that I went through. And when I look at this idea of becoming a judge, in my mind, the most important thing is that we are here to serve the people in our community. We are servants for the people of our community. And once we lose that perspective and that the people in our community become a means to an end for us, then rule of law is gone, procedural fairness is gone. And now I've placed myself in the center of a judicial universe. And I have corrupted not only myself, but the entire system because credibility is out the window. And I know I have a few more minutes left, so I want to make sure. And when I look at this idea of how do I do these analysis, this all takes self-awareness. We have to be mindful of our thoughts, our actions, mindful if I'm in the middle of something and an emotion has arisen and I'm not taking an action based upon that emotion, that I'm coming from more of that a space between an emotion and an action to allow wisdom to come in. Also, I need to always be able to access what is needed to make fair and just decisions. And that is where wellness comes in, well-being. And when you're young, we weren't trained when I was a young person, which is many years ago, I was not trained in taking care of myself. And it is so important that you develop those practices now that promote well-being on a physical level, emotional level, and spiritual level. And the practice is a whole nother 5 hours that we could talk about. But what this, the work that we do, even as a lawyer, even as a provider, it leads to isolation. We're always under public perception. And I think that if we are able to keep ourselves healthy in a spiritual sense, emotional sense, and physical sense, that we are less inclined to compromise ourselves, because we'll be in a lot stronger position. So recognizing that every moment that I live, right, this moment is the result of all those other moments, by making those wise, healthy, value-based decisions, will help make us more resilient against compromising ourselves and our value systems. So I'm going to go ahead and stop here, and I know that, so thank you so much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Judge Race. It's really interesting, all of the points that you mentioned. And I must say, before I move to Denise, I really liked, and if I may quote here, is just this point what you mentioned about the gut feeling, when we know we are pushing the edges, when we know the feeling of what to do, but the decision at the moment is what really connects with our value system. I'm sure all of us, 100% sure that all of us were in such positions before. I mean, I do face this on a daily basis. And of course, this point that you mentioned, and rightly so, about cultural humility and openness to learning when we deal with issues related to ethics and integrity, I think is also very important. There's so much, I think there is a strong need to unlearn, to learn as well, when it comes to this important area of work, and unlearning to relearn and learn different ways of seeing others, and different, and being more open. And this point of cultural humility actually really resonated also very well when we look at this topic. And finally, the point also about emotional, spiritual, and physical well-being, which is absolutely of utmost importance, of course, when it comes, to this the issues that we were discussing and the issues at stake. So thank you so much, and I'm sure there will be some interesting questions afterwards. So thank you for being with us today. And now I hand over to Ms. Denise Neves Abade, and we're looking forward to your intervention. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all. I'm very pleased to have been invited to deliver this short lecture today. Well, I am a university professor and a prosecutor, because in Brazil, it is possible for magistrates from the Judiciary and from the Public Prosecution Service to pursue an academic career at the same time. And I thank the UNODC for the opportunity to be here today. Thank you, Judge Race, for your excellent lecture. And I'm very happy to be here in this International Youth Day in order to engage in this conversation with youth, academics, activists, and judges, and my colleagues from Prosecution Service, and to highlight that young people have the power to change the culture for a better world, and can indeed prevent corruption, and to help to look out for judicial integrity. Well, corruption has, as Lula said, a direct impact on the validity on human rights, largely because of two reasons. On one side, corruption deprives society of important resources that could be used for basic needs, such as public health, education, infrastructure, security. According to a study from the OECD, the cost of corruption in its different modalities constitutes more than 5% of the global GDP. On the other side, corruption has direct damaging consequences in general on the functioning of state institutions, and in particular on the administration of justice. Corruption decreases public trust in justice. Corruption weakens the capacity of judicial systems to guarantee the protection of human rights. And it affects the text and duties of juries, prosecutors, lawyers, and other legal professions. By seeking impunity, corruption has a devastating effect on the judicial system as a whole. And one of the goals of human rights is to fight corruption and its implication on the administration of justice, as it's to act against corruption through an independent and strong administration of justice. And for this, it's so important that the United Nations Convention Against Corruption as a fundamental instrument for the protection of human rights. And the judiciary has a primary responsibility to deliver justice for all and to curb corruption. And these are two targets of the Sustainable Development Goal 16 on peace, justice, and strong institutions. And with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the judiciaries from around the world are all called to join forces and to support each other in developing mechanisms that help deliver justice for all. And this can be made possible through transparency and promote integrity and increasing public trust without impeding the independence of the judiciary at the same time. And the corruption and lack of integrity in the judiciary are major impediments to justice delivery and the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. So, according to Transparency International Global Corruption Barometer from 2019, citizens around the world perceive the judiciary as one of the most corruption-prone sectors, with 30% of the respondents believing that most judges and magistrates are corrupt. Wow, the poorest and most marginalized citizens are the ones who suffer most, as they are less likely in this scenario to pay bribes and have limited access to inflation networks. And besides hampering public confidence in the institutions and undermining stability in fragile context, corruption and lack of integrity in the judiciary also constitute a human rights violation. So how do we go about addressing this situation? First of all, we have to recognize we have this problem. And then I believe we should intensify training in this area. Training helps because some, if not most, judges who violate judicial ethics do through inadvertence, through failure to recognize the relevant and ethical issue, or from ignorance of the existence of particular rules of judicial ethics. And the judiciary indeed needs to be independent of influence, in particular from political and economic forces. However, judicial independence does not mean that judges, the magistrates, should have an absolute liberty to behave as they please. Judicial independence is founded on public trust. And to maintain that trust, judges must uphold the highest ethos of integrity. To understand judicial integrity, we must understand the interplay between two perspectives. The first perspective is that of individual judges. How judges acquire the right professional attitude. The first perspective is connected with integrity as presupposed by the rule of law. And the second perspective is an external one, and it's connected to democratic legitimacy. What does society expect from the judge? Where too is the trust of the public directed, and when is sufficient effort made to ensure it? The universal acceptance of judicial integrity is a fundamental constituent of a strong legal system. And to be an independent judge, to be an independent lawyer, prosecutor, require many elements, but integrity is perhaps the most crucial one. Integrity regards many challenges that may happen along the activity of a judge, and one of them is the challenge and the threat of corruption. in order to prevent corruption from permeating the judiciary, it is crucial to strengthen the capacities of judges, capacity lawyers, and public prosecutors to confront corruption. At the end of the day, judges, public prosecutors, lawyers, we are a minority in the society. But if we all perform properly the role, we are vaccinated against corruption. This is a benefit for whole society. And society will return with a better support to the judiciary. It will grant legitimacy for the judiciary. It is a virtuous cycle. And citizens trust the judiciary when the judiciary is transparent, when the judiciary is consistent, when the judiciary is independent. Judicial integrity involves making judicial decisions that will show the court's commitment to lawfulness and to justice. And this is one of the major tasks when you talk about strength integrity. The citizens wish to see judges that are impartial, that are ethical, that are competent, and that are effective. They desire a justice system that is accessible, the justice system that is efficient, that is modern, one that produces fair and reasonable and predictable outcomes. And most of all, the public wish to see judges of unimpeachable integrity. The judicial integrity concept presupposes that the principles of judicial independence, transparency, accountability are philosophically, are practically interconnected, and the concept has inevitably gained prominence at global, at regional, at national levels in evaluate best practice regarding the compass of the roles and responsibilities of judges and judiciary. And all the foregoing instruments converge in the Bangalore principles. The Bangalore principles are the zenith of all concerted efforts and establish acceptable standards of judicial integrity. As a professor, let me tell you here a little bit about the historical background of the Bangalore principles. The invitation of the UN Center for International Crime Prevention and Transparency and the Transparency International, the Judicial Group of Strengthening Judicial Integrity put forward the first draft of Bangalore Principles in Vienna in 2000, 22 years ago, which was predicated on a large number of ethical codes for judiciaries. The Judicial Group consisted in the UN Special Reporter on the Independence of Judges and Lawyers, and by Judge Weirmentry, Vice President of the International Court of Justice at the time. And the first draft was revised a number of times so as to adequately reflect principles of both common law and civil law traditions. And the revised principles were adopted in November 2002, 20 years ago. In 2003, the Bangalore Principles were endorsed by UN Commission on Human Rights and subsequently endorsed by UN Commission on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice. In 2006, the UN Economic and Social Council, they adopted a resolution in which it recognized the Bangalore principles and represents a further development of and being part complementary to the UN basic principles on the independence of the judiciary. So consequently invited member states to encourage their judiciary to take into consideration the Bangalore principles when reviewing or develop rules with respect to the professional and ethical conduct of members of the judiciary. So in its final form, the 6 fundamental values stated in the Bangalore principle are judicial independence, both individual and institutional, as a prerequisite to the rule of law, impartiality, not only to decision itself, but also to the process, integrity, property and the appearance of property, and equality of treatment to all, and competence and diligence. Each of these values are supported by statement of the principle and a series of points relevant to its application. Here in Brazil, in August 2008, the National Council of Justice approved the text of Code of Ethics and Integrity of National Judiciary. It's a document in which the principles that should guide all the judiciary are highlighted. And this document is clearly based on the Bangalore principles. That's why it's so important. They are so important. And according to the Bangalore principles, and according to our resolution, integrity is a principle qualified as absolute, and is defined as the attribute of correctness and virtue have as element of its application the values of judicial honesty, judicial morality. So, public confidence in the administration of justice can only be achieved if judges, public prosecutors, lawyers consistently conduct in an ethical manner. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, and thank you for this very interesting and important intervention. Of course, judicial independence is founded on trust. And as you mentioned, also to understand judicial integrity, we need to also understand the interplay between the two perspectives. And also, judges' independence does not mean that they can act as they please. They are responsible to uphold public trust in the judiciary and to meet the expectations, also court users. And their work should entail modern, reasonable, and also predictable outcomes. As you mentioned, of course, this is because judicial integrity is a fundamental cornerstone for strong legal systems. So thank you so much for your intervention and for being with us today. Again, thank you, Judge Reyes, for being with us today. I will now give the floor to my colleague, Leonardo Paradiso, who is coordinating the youth empowerment component of the Global Resource and Anti-Corruption Education and Youth Empowerment Initiative, GRACE. Leonardo, please, moderation over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lulu. I would like to thank our two esteemed speakers, Honorable Judge Reyes, Professor Denise. It was a real pleasure for me, and I believe I can speak for all the participants today. It was very enlightening to hear what you have to say. I would like to recall just before opening the Q&A session, where I hope that all of our participants that will engage with you for constructive dialogues. I would like to recall two little discussion points that you mentioned that I liked very much. Judge Reyes, I liked what you said about the need for a physical, spiritual, and emotional well-being. That reminded me of that mens sana in corpore sana, old Latin maxim that so much has to say until today. Professor Denise, I like the metaphor that you did about the judicial sector as an organic part of society. So we're talking about like a living organism that needs to be working properly in order for the entire system to grow wealthier and healthier and growing better and stronger. So these are 2 points that I personally thank you for mentioning. I found them very, very beautiful. At this point, I would like to turn to the audience, to the members of the Youth-Led Integrity Advisory Board, the member of the Academic Anti-Corruption Network, the members of the Global Judicial Integrity Network, as well as the students of the Mackenzie University, to take the chance and ask as many questions that you would like to our 2 esteemed speakers. We will, from our side, the UNODC, try to manage as many questions as possible, as I said, in order. So please do not hesitate. This is a safe space for conversation. Do take the floor, raise your hand first, and then we will give you the floor to pose your questions. Don't be shy. As I said, this is a safe space for conversations.
Yes. Okay. Please, because this is why we're here. It is not only for you to hear us, but definitely for us to learn from you. And in the chat, I'm going to put something while people are deciding that what they're going to ask. I'm going to put in the chat my contact information, also our wellness website from the National Council, which has a lot of the tools that we can use other than relying on negative types of actions or habits in order to deal with the stressors of the work. So.
Thank you, Judge.
Yes, if I may I intervene?
Please, of course, by all means.
Yes, my name is Alvin Kunjal, and I'm from the Republic of Mauritius, currently working at the Independent Commission Against Corruption. I've taken note of very interesting points made by Judge Reyes and Mrs. Denise, and I would like to ask one particular question with respect to the integrity aspect of how should judges manage the integrity aspect, and then shift to the corruption aspect. If I may ask the question as to, do you think it would be interesting or whether possible to maintain like rigorous training for current sitting judges with regards to their values and the attitudes which they need to bring up when they are at the bench? Whether they're dealing with different kind of cases, it's not a matter, but do you think that they should undergo a certain amount of training, maybe on a yearly or regular basis? I don't know how it would be time-span, in order for them to be more acquainted, I mean, to get to know about the changing world of how corruption may occur towards them. That's the first question which I wanted to ask. And jumping onto that, whether the aspect of integrity as well and the value-based system which is inculcated in our knowledge when we study about ethics and so on, should this aspect as well be explored on a continuous basis so as to remind the judges or to remind the people from the profession that they have to stick to a certain standard and certain ethical behaviors while they are sitting at the bench or in chambers as well. So if I could get an answer as to that, I should be much grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. I'm involved with judicial training all over the United States, specifically on this area of judicial wellness. I also do domestic violence training. You cannot train enough. The whole thing with training is it's one thing to sit there and listen to somebody talk to you, but it's another thing to take what you're learning and actually incorporate it into your DNA. And that's the hard part, I think, for people. And I think that, you know, training in a way that judges can then take what they're learning and incorporate that into their daily lives is crucial. So it's not only the fact that you're training, talking to people, but also training in a manner where it's a practical that they can put to use, maybe even in the room they're training in. And then there's the willingness to change. We get so stuck. I don't care who you are. I don't care what age you are. We get stuck in habits. But it's that the whole thing about wanting to change. First of all, realizing I need to change, wanting to change, and then having an understanding of what does change mean, and how that benefits not only myself, my community, but everybody around me. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you very much. In fact, the willingness to change was an interesting spot-on point, which currently does look about into the question. So thank you very much.
If I may add something, I firmly believe that training is very important to foster integrity, but we have a popular saying in Brazil that says that the water is soft, and soft water, when it hard, even soft water, when it hits a hard rock for a long time, can break it. And that's the idea of regular judicial training in integrity and I strongly believe in that, and I also believe at everything that Judge Reyes just said.
And there's also a comment I see in the chat about advantage or disadvantage to transitioning from a law. It's interesting because it's my experience now in training judges across the country that because of burnout, empathetic distress, many judges are leaving because they don't know how to handle the stressor and the secondary trauma that comes with being a judge. So then, you know, there's a lot of appointments by younger judges across at least the United States. The problem becomes if those young judges at the ages of, you know, mid-30s, you know, if I consider that young at my age, but if you get this job as a young judge and you don't put in those practices and tools that are going to develop your resilience, I'm not talking about hardening you to what you're seeing. That's the last thing we want. We don't want to lose our compassion, but if, you know, we want to be able to develop a resilience in a way that will allow us to keep doing the work with an open heart and using our wisdom, that I see a lot of people, you know, burning out when they're younger. So if you're interested in a judicial career, I see a lot of young judges, but then those judges need to put those tools in place, because I wasn't taught that way. I was taught that, you know, what judges need to do is basically, you know, well-being for judges is judicial ethics, and that's it. But there's those other aspects that we've talked about. So.
Thank you, Judge Reyes. That was a very, very good point, that of burnout as well. I see that we have hands up by Krista. Krista, go ahead, take the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm sorry, I have a very bad voice. I will try and speak so that you can hear me. I'm a judge in the UK, and I have been involved for many years in both training and more recently in appointing judges to the UK judiciary. And I've been thinking about what the two speakers have said, and thank you very much for your very insightful comments. Training obviously is a key to building the resilience of judges and to improving judicial integrity. But I wonder whether the speakers have anything to say on taking that back a step to the point where judges are appointed, because Judge Reyes, you made the very interesting point that judicial integrity is the same as personal integrity, which might suggest that we all have our own innate value system. And if that's right, I wonder how appointment systems can identify that in judges when they're appointed, and whether even they should. So that was my question.
This is fascinating, because I was recently in at a training, and one of the points that was made was, you know, as you're going through the application process and you're saying all those right things to get the job, well, once you get the job, do them. You know, we say all these things when we're applying for jobs, don't we? You know, I'm going to be this fair, you know, well, live up to what you're saying. And I think that as we're going, as a young lawyer, I had a decision. I don't want to take up too much time from the professor, but as a young lawyer, I was in court one time and the judge had made a mistake, and I could have gotten my client's case dismissed. Well, I had a decision to make at that point of whether or not ethically I should speak up and say, no, judge, you're looking at the wrong date in order to start this, or this something had happened where we waived our right to speedy trial and the judge didn't see that. Had I kept my mouth shut, I would have gotten my client's case dismissed. But for the rest of my life, I'm going to live with that moment, not only in my own heart, but in that judicial building. My reputation for lack of integrity would have spread like wildfire. So I think that when we're doing the judicial appointments, it is so important that when we look at the backgrounds, we recognize, you know, those, you know, and people are honest. about those situations where that lawyer or whoever the person may be did not live up to a standard of ethics. And we should have honest discussions about that when we are going through the appointment process. So I think, and you find that out in courthouses. You don't find that out from friends, letters of support and friends, but you find that out from the clerks, the people in the courthouses, opposing counsel. That's where you find out those integrity issues. And I'm hoping that helps answer that question.
I don't know if I can compliment. I don't know if I will answer your question, but that is excellent argument, question too. But I also would like to add that each country has a different way of application, of applying it for entry into the magistrature career. But maybe the appointment, the solution for appointment, maybe, I don't know, in Brazil, as in many countries in Latin America and in continental Europe, the entry is by public exams. They are transparent, they are open to lawyers with extensive written oral tests, and I think this is more democratic because everyone who studies and who is interested in entry in the magistrature career can, in this way, apply to. It could be a judge if it studies, if the person could study a lot for these exams.
Thank you.
And I know our time is limited, but if you know, there's a lot of great questions and comments in the chat. If it's possible to get copies of those, and I don't know if Professor would be willing to, but I would be willing to answer those through an email that can be then shared with everybody, because I don't want to lose some of the great questions and points that are being made in the chat. So I'm hoping that we can preserve that.
Sure, of course, this is a beautifully proactive approach, Judge Reyes. Many thanks for that. We will see definitely to send you these emails also via written format in email, so that you can provide your response. That will be very much appreciated. And having said so, and as I said, this is a very good idea considering the time restraints. Now it is my pleasure to give the floor to our colleague and dear friend, Tatiana Veres. She is a crime prevention and criminal justice officer here at UNODC and is the lead of the Global Judicial Integrity Network. Tatiana, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Leonardo, for giving me the floor. Wow, what a great discussion. Thank you so much, Judge Reyes and Professor Neves Abade, for your availability, as well as for your great idea at the end to help answer the questions in chat later by email. That is really much appreciated. I am very happy that today, on the special occasion of the International Youth Day, we could bring together and create a dialogue between judges, academia, and youth, and that we could also highlight the linkages between two of UNODC's initiatives. On one hand, the GRACE initiative, which targets primarily youth and educators, and on the other hand, the Global Judicial Integrity Network, which works primarily with judges and members of the judiciary. And as we could also hear in today's session, the goal is common for all of us, and that is to reject culture of corruption, of cheating and dishonesty, and replace it with a culture of ethics, transparency, and accountability. And to this, I would also echo some of the other words mentioned by the wonderful speakers, that we also need more culture of compassion, of humility, humbleness, altruism, fairness, self-awareness, and there's just so much that is to this whole picture. Youth and the judiciary, they are closely related. Young people are affected by judicial decisions. They are the existing as well as prospective court users, and they should have high expectations. in terms of the quality of work of the judiciary, as well as of the judiciary ensuring fairness, equality, and impartiality. And corruption should never be tolerated. It should never become the accepted norm. And youth plays an important role in identifying problems in the judiciary, as well as seeking accountability from the judiciary. And there is also, of course, the other side, and it was also mentioned in the speakers' presentations, that many young people enter and will enter into a legal profession and will become judges. And integrity, which will be expected of them, is not a quality that can be acquired in an instant. Rather, this process should start already in childhood. Integrity should be infused into learning processes so that one has enough opportunities and situations to internalize it and to consider culture of integrity the norm. And today's session has been great in bringing these perspectives together. So again, I would like to thank very much the speakers for sharing their really interesting insights. All of you participating and contributing to the discussion and asking really great questions, as well as all colleagues involved in the organization of today's event. I hope that even beyond today's International Day, we can continue to foster this dialogue, create even more opportunities for experience sharing, mentoring, learning from one another. And for this, you are all very welcome to follow the activities of the GRACE Initiative and of the Global Judicial Integrity Network. My colleagues posted into the chat links to our websites where you can learn about learn more about our ongoing activities. And with this, seeing that it's exactly 4 o'clock Vienna time, I would conclude the session wishing everyone a nice rest of the day. Many thanks for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at future events of UNODC. Thank you.